Hello. I am calling to order the regular meeting of the Park Ridge Park District Board of Park Commissioners. Today is Thursday, February 18th, 2021, and it is 7:01 p.m. Please call the roll.
Sure. Commissioner Grau?
Here.
Commissioner Harrington?
Here.
Commissioner Leduc? Is her speaker on?
She's saying here.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. Commissioner Leach? Commissioner O'Donnell?
Here.
Commissioner Tunnell?
Here.
Commissioner Coyne?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Leach did reach out to both myself and Executive Director Mountcastle to say that he would not be able to attend this meeting today. Would anyone like to amend, add, or delete an item to the current agenda? No? Well, is there any member of the public who would like to comment on any non-agenda item? Or better said, is there any member of the public?
There are a couple of people in the audience now, so if either of them would like to make public comment, please use the raise your hand function and I will unmute you to speak. No one has raised their hand.
Okay, thank you. In that case, I move to approve the regular board meeting minutes of Thursday, January 21, 2021, and Thursday, February 4, 2021. This action will be formally ratified at an actual board meeting with physical presence at a later date.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Are there any questions? All right. Commissioner Grau?
Yes.
Commissioner Harrington?
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc?
Yes.
Commissioner Leach? Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne?
Aye. Okay, that carried. Now we're on to reports from park officials, and the president has a statement that I'd like to read. So I'll just jump right in. Just as our programming is starting to reflect fewer mitigation restrictions now that our region is in phase 4 of the Restore Illinois plan, and just as we can open more and more of our facilities under phase 4, so too is it our intent to move forward towards more in-person attendance at our board meetings. To prepare for phase 5 and beginning with the March 18th meeting, we are encouraging commissioners and the public to attend in person. The district will observe all IDPH guidance on social distancing and capacity. This guidance still makes a full in-person meeting impractical, and therefore the board meetings will still have a remote component for commissioners, staff, and the public. However, any commissioner that wishes to attend in person can do so, and the public will be allowed at the meetings on a limited basis. It's 6 maximum, with others waiting in space outside the boardroom if they wish to make public comment in person. This hybrid option will also still allow commissioners, the public, and staff to attend virtually. Our goal is to continue to follow the state guidelines, increase options for the productive and open meeting, for the most productive and open meeting possible, while also offering a safe environment and start to move towards an all in-person meeting during phase 5. If people would like to comment on that, it's fine. There is no vote necessary. Or if you'd prefer, you can just get in touch with me offline after the meeting, and we can talk about any of the anything that I talked about here. Hearing no questions or comments, we'll move on to does our attorney have anything to report?
Other than my ineptitude with the camera, no, nothing new. We walked through the general philosophy, Gail and I did, that as we try to open more and more stuff and return closer to the prior normal, if you will, in operations, we have to be cognizant of that with how we operate as a board. And that was, and you know, what you just read, Mr. President, is consistent with that. So thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. I'll turn the floor to Executive Director Mountcastle.
You're muted.
Sorry about that. So very brief report. We are still working with Cook County. I heard from the representative on Monday, and she said that they've reached out to IDPH with our questions on how to define our employees, and that I would hear back once that she got the word from IDPH and they answered their questions. You know, I've talked to several other directors that are in the same boat in the North Suburban Cook area, and we are all, I'm kind of the voice right now for about 4 or 5 agencies, so we're not bombarding them, because she said we're not the only groups of employees, as you can imagine, that are trying to get defined still in 1B, 1C. So, you know, our basic premise is that we have been considered essential this whole time. I think I've mentioned this to the board, and that we should, you know, be up on the priority list because we've been there for the public, you know, the whole time. So they have all our different definitions. I broke it out into different, all of our, and I told her that, I said, we're, you know, we're a very different business because we have all these different categories of employees. And so, you know, while we have the Parks Department staff outside right now, that's not necessarily, you know, involved, you know, communicating with the public as much, that changes very quickly in the spring. And, you know, our custodians in the buildings, our recreation staff, our full-time supervisors are jumping into classes even right now, you know, for frontline. So we had a really good conversation, very receptive. She's a government liaison, so I got the right person. And so we're trying to be patient because there's just not the supply right now. And I know that they're dealing with what they're dealing with other issues. Once the supply becomes more, you know, available, I will get a little bit more pushy with that. But I feel like it's, you know, at least they're responding to us, and she's given me her cell phone number. And so there's a good relationship being built there. And so I will also push her and ask her, you know, once we start getting more supply, about the vaccination sites. And we will also, we're meeting again on Monday, our team that has been working through a lot of the restore guidelines, that are the back to work guidelines, because now the new issue is, of course, once the staff and the public are getting vaccinated, how does that translate now into, you know, how long, if they are exposed, do they have to quarantine, right? So that's kind of our next step. There's a couple staff attending a prodromal workshop on all things COVID, you know, as we are right now, tomorrow. So we're hoping to get some more answers in this next stage. So we're taking it one step at a time. But we also feel like we're, you know, continuing to offer what we can and, you know, be here for the public. So that's it on COVID in terms of what I have. And the only other thing I wanted to mention, I can't remember if I mentioned this at the last meeting, but we're going to be the host district for the first virtual legislative event that used to be the breakfast, and it's March 15th. So Marianne will be sending you your invite. I encourage you to attend that. It's always a very informative gathering. Sometimes there gets some good questions to the legislators, and so it could get, sometimes it gets a little heated, but it's always good. It's a good time to have a conversation with our local legislators. There's several districts involved. So that's 9:30 in the morning on March 15th. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you may have at this time. And then there's also the marketing and the human resource reports. I can answer questions, or Margaret can, on those as well. Questions? Thank you. That's my report.
Where am I? Oh,
Uh,
finance, right?
Yep.
All right. Sorry about that. I dropped my agenda on the floor. Not quite as same as not bringing it at all, but close. Well, I got to turn the floor over to our treasurer and Commissioner Harrington.
Thank you, President Coyne. I have my agenda in my hand and we'll turn it over to Superintendent DeAngelis. While we've got the written finance report in our packet, perhaps she can do a summary and then answer any questions at this time.
Sure, thank you, Commissioner Harrington. The written finance report begins on page 15 of the board packet PDF file. I do want to highlight that the 2020 audit is underway and finance staff have been very busy preparing for it. I will cover details with the monthly report by funds and updated projections, but otherwise I'd be happy to answer any questions on the written report at this time, if anyone has them.
Commissioner Grau.
Beat you, Jim. I wondered about these claims for unemployment. When, like, if you've reported those however many people, when does it stop? Like, when do they quit reapplying?
I don't know.
It's the same 10 people, right? Or however many it is, 12. What were they?
I can check and find out if they are the same. You know, essentially what we're reporting on is how many claims are coming that our payroll administrator is reviewing. And that she's identifying this number of fraudulent claims. So yes, they could be the same people. I don't know for certain. I'd have to double check the report. But as long as these claims are being made, they'll keep coming through to us, and then we'll, you know, report on them. That.
So nobody's identified who's making the claim, just because we told them it's fraudulent, but the person has not, or persons have not been caught.
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know what the state's fraud process is.
Thank you.
And many companies have been hit by this. This is like across the board. So, you know, I think this is just kind of the new world we're living in, that there are significant amounts of fraudulent claims being filed.
Right, but you wouldn't think it would be the same week after week after week. You'd think at one point it would turn off when you say no 3 or 4 or 5 times.
Yeah,
Oh, I don't know. Sandra would have to say, but I mean, I was a victim of this myself as an employer and the employee of my company. It's very, I don't even think they're 100% sure how the bad guys are getting that information at this point. That's what I was told when I went through the fraud investigation for my own thing. But
I can attest to the same thing. I mean, I was at the police department and they're like, oh, what are you here for? The fraud? Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, there's so many of them that I don't even think they expect to catch these people. It's like so rampant.
Yeah, and I think that there's so much that is flowing through the IDES that it's really, again, I'm not exactly sure what their process is, but I feel like it's important to report on, you know, all of the claims that our payroll administrator is, you know, looking at each week and managing and reviewing and making sure that these fraudulent claims are not going through. So that's really the purpose of why I'm showing that in the report. But I can, look into whether it's the same people.
You don't need to spend more time. I just thought at a certain point they would give up on those 10 people. So we don't have that many full-time employees, so.
Yeah. Commissioner O'Donnell, did you have a question? So.
No, I wanted to make a comment. I wanted to once again highlight the achievement of you and the district on the accounting and reporting award. I always forget exactly what the name of it is that we've had for many, many, many consecutive years. And, I would highlight that, I'd say a couple things about it, that we are surrounded by other units of government that don't even come close to being able to file their financial report on a timely basis. But that sets a pretty low bar. I'd like everybody to know, including the public, that when we did our review for accounting services, when we put that out for bid to consider, one of the questions I asked was about this award. And I said, hey, is this just kind of window dressing or is this a big deal? And they said it is a big deal. And so I think it's something that we can all should be very, very proud of.
Thank you. If there are no other questions or comments, we could move on to the first report in the packet.
Can I just make a comment about the IT thing, or are you going to come to that?
Oh, no, go ahead.
I wanted you to know that I was also pleased to see you moving that back up to an off-site thing as a secondary level of redundancy. That's a very, very good practice.
Yeah, thank you. We feel very comfortable now that, particularly we see and hear so much about, incidents of ransomware and everything I learn about it and other, cyber attacks is that, speaking of fraud, right, that it's not a matter of if, but when. So we feel that this step in having that additional offsite backup is really going to prepare us in the event that does occur. We have everything covered. So
you never know.
Thank you for noting that.
Yeah, that's great. That would shut down our operations entirely. The more digital we're becoming, I keep saying, oh, you're putting this online, you're putting that online, and then you get shut down. Is it nightly, Sandra?
Yes.
Great. That's awesome.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. So I did include an updated monthly report by funds for December 2020, so that you can see how, as we continue to accrue and do our final closing process, how the numbers are changing. So that begins on page 19 of the board packet. What I'm showing you here is the operating fund. So I wanted to highlight that this is the last page on page 23 of the PDF file. It shows the operating fund net deficit of a negative 59,000, which increased approximately 46,000 compared to the 13,000 negative that we were reporting at the last board meeting. So as a reminder, this report remains preliminary, and we have accrued additional expenses through this week's vendor payments. And after receiving additional information regarding the 2020 ADA expenses, which I received after I had prepared my report, I am comfortable now estimating that the net deficit is not likely to exceed 200,000, and that's pending final accruals and completion of the audit. So considering all of the uncertainty and limitations surrounding the pandemic, the expected impact, I feel that the expected impact on the 2020 ending fund balance is quite manageable. Does anybody have any questions about the year-end update? Okay, hearing none, I will move on to the monthly reports. So on the next page, the next 3 pages, I'm sorry, on the next page in the treasurer's report, this shows that our cash position remained strong at the end of January. So I'm quite comfortable that as we're now getting into the end of February, we're going to begin seeing distributions of the first half property tax installment, which is due on March 1st. So that is good. And then the portfolio reports on the following 3 pages indicate very little change from the prior month. I do want to make note that we did in February invest about $750,000 for December 1st debt service payments, which you'll see reflected in next month's report. Yields are really, really low. They were about, the CDs we invested in are about 0.1%. Sorry, 0.10, 10 basis points. 0.1%. So that's a little higher than what the benchmark is yielding. And then our monthly reports for January begin on page 28 of the PDF file. So as always, this time of year, with so little time elapsed, it's a little hard to say how we're doing, but to date, the total net surplus across all funds, which you see on the first page of, excuse me, the total net deficit is better than budget by about, this thing keeps popping up. Are you guys seeing that on the screen? There we go. This column here is showing the difference between, first column is showing our total deficit position of about 132,000 compared to what we had budgeted for January, where normally, because we haven't received tax receipts yet, we would be in a total negative position, according to the budget, of 240,000. So we're doing better than budget year to date, however, lower than the prior year by about 227,000. So the next fund, the next page is we start to break out by fund, and the general fund shows a similar pattern to what we're seeing in 2020. So you can see that we're on track with revenues in line with the budget. And as is typical this time of year, expenses are below budget. Expenses are also lower than the prior year by about 45,000, which is consistent with our lower budget this year. Moving on to the recreation fund, due to the pandemic mitigations, which have recently been relaxed, as we all know, the recreation revenues are only about 30% of what we had budgeted for January. However, also following the pattern that we experienced in 2020, expenses are also lower, about 33% of budgeted. Next is the capital fund, which is about where we would expect it at this time of year. I would like to point out here, though, that the miscellaneous revenue that we received in January was the lease payment from the Historical Society, which we were very happy to see. So lastly, on the operating fund, it shows that operating fund results to date are about 130,000 better than budgeted and about 280,000 lower than this time last year. The last regular report is the fund balance projection, and that shows our actual January and projected revenues and expenses according to the 2021 budget. So this kind of lays out, according to the budget, how we would expect our total fund balance to look throughout the year. Does anyone have questions on the monthly report by funds?
I don't see any.
Okay, hearing none. I think we can, the next agenda item, I believe, would be the projection scenarios. So here we've updated the graph to show throughout the projected fiscal year. I do want to point out that I added a line here, this green dashed line, which is showing us kind of the table that we just looked at, what our projected fund balance would be according to the budget. So the yellow and red lines again represent the projected fund balance for the moderate and stress case scenarios. You can see how the moderate case is slightly more conservative than the dashed green budget line. And these will continue to be adjusted as more information is available. And each month we will continue to evaluate the assumptions and make updates as more information becomes available. Does anybody have questions on the projection scenarios?
Just have a comment that I think it's, I'm glad that these bars are running closer together. And that's obviously because you have more data, and you were flying blind a year ago, you know, today. And again, we've said it a lot, but I can't say it enough, is how impressed I think the whole board is with your ability to have projected these things out in the way that you did. And so I trust that these lines are going to be pretty close to what actually happens depending on the different scenarios. And even the worst one is a lot better than what it could have been. So I'm just really optimistic, and again, really impressed with your ability to forecast this stuff out. So that's my only comment.
Thank you. And I would just add that to remind you all that when we kind of set this out initially, we wanted this to be a tool and a framework to be able to manage through this, the unknowns in this situation. And I think it has been helpful in that regard. And, you know, it's what we're looking to hit is our budget line, right? The dashed green line. So, but what we're, you know, imagining is, oh, if it's as bad as the yellow line or the red line or somewhere in between, what will the impact be to our financial situation? So,
yeah, no, it's been really helpful, Superintendent DeAngelis, and then obviously I'm assuming to Gail as well, and making some decisions for the district and then for the board, and kind of overseeing where we're at and if we have to make, you know, tougher decisions or not, and can loosen up. So thank you, because I think that really helps guide decision making for the district as well.
thank you all.
Any other questions on the COVID-19 updated financial projections?
I have a question.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Could you put that last slide back up, please? So, you know, and I saw this in conjunction with what you wrote in terms of how many months expenditures is left in these scenarios, and that red one is really getting scary. And so I don't know that it's going to get worse than that. But my question would be, what if it does? What do we do? Because that's getting really scary.
So One of the big reasons why that scenario is more dire is it has the assumption on property taxes, which is, you know, close to half of our revenue, is like that we're getting 85%. So what we've learned and been good at managing is really the kind of recreation revenue operations, and when those things aren't running, that those expenses aren't continuing. So I think if that were the case, that, you know, after we see what is after the first half property tax installment is collected, what is our collection rate? If we see that it's somewhere approaching that bad, I think then we have to really look at our administrative operations, or, you know, the side of the business that's funded more by the property taxes, to see, you know, what kind of adjustments are feasible. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And I'm comforted that, you know, after the first half installment, we'll have a pretty good idea, you know, collections are on track as they normally would be, or if we are starting to see, you know, a bigger percentage than what we had budgeted for. And if you remember, we built a 2% decline in the budget, you know, that we'll be able to, you know, start thinking about that sooner rather than too far down the road. So
I would also understand, and you didn't say this directly, but you implied it, that, so that's if you have property tax shortfall, then you look at the administrative side. But I think you said if you had recreational shortfall, you address that with scaling back on that end. Is that correct?
well, yeah, I mean, the biggest example is when we don't have the program revenue, we also don't have the program expenses.
Right.
So,
And I think that, you know, to add to that and reiterate, is that we saw what we were able to do with our operations at the worst, you know, at the worst time, let's hope, right, of this pandemic. And so I'm confident that we've learned a lot, and we did a lot of things right, in terms of, and with, you know, this kind of a forecasting, it really guides us well, and it doesn't let us go too long before we were able to shift. And that's what we've been doing this whole time, and that's what we'll continue to do. And I agree, after we see what those first installments are of the property tax. But other than that, I think we're pretty confident that, you know, we're able to manage this scenario, certainly much at a much better comfort level. Not that we want to see a negative at the end of the year, but a negative 200,000, which is within our $500,000 safety net, which I think is a great thing this district has set up as well. That we're, you know, we can make it through this. So thank you, Mr. Andrew. Yeah, thank you.
mhm.
Any other questions on the projections? All right, let's move on to approval of expenditures. I move to approve for payment vouchers in the total amount of $281,794.63. This action will be formally ratified at an actual board meeting with physical presence at a later date. May I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Mary Ann, may you please take the roll?
Sure. Commissioner Harrington,
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc,
Yes.
Commissioner Leach, Commissioner O'Donnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Grau,
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And at the last board meeting, we had a discussion and consensus on approval of a P card or purchasing card program agreement. So I'll move right to the motion. I move to approve entering into a purchasing card agreement with Fifth Third Bank and to authorize the president and treasurer to execute and deliver the agreement contingent upon pending acceptance from Fifth Third Bank. This action will be formally ratified at an actual board meeting with physical presence at a later date. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Questions for Superintendent DeAngelis? Hearing none. Miriam, may you please call the roll?
Commissioner Leduc,
Yes.
Commissioner Leach, Commissioner O'Donnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Grau,
Heck, yes.
You
Commissioner
better.
Harrington,
Yes.
Commissioner
All right.
Coyne.
Aye.
Thank you.
I almost skipped you, President Coyne. All right, we'll move over to recreation, which I'm so excited to say there is more of these days in the district. So Commissioner Grau.
All right, I will hand it over to April. Before I do, I have to say, once again, I'm reading these events and saying, how do they even think of this? They're awesome, April.
Lots of creative minds over there.
Oh my gosh, we'll never have dull programming ever.
We never did.
No, I know, but it's like
Even more creative now.
you're so
Yeah.
outside the box that I bet this will change things, don't you think?
Yeah.
Or-
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think people are going to be more willing to do things outside in the cold than they ever were before also.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's awesome. Just awesome.
Yes. Well, thank you. Well, as far as the report, unfortunately, January, we were still mostly in a tier where we were restricted. So, our numbers have declined from some of the past months. So so the portion of the month had limited in-person activities, but of course, the locations that were allowed, we continued to have programming. So this board report reflects this. But we, again, still had lots of online and virtual programs and, of course, these wonderful events. So we're back in action at all of the facilities. So hopefully in the next few reports, you'll definitely see an increase in some of the participation numbers. People are definitely interested in returning. So I'd be happy to answer any specific questions about the report if you have any.
Is it, oh, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Harrington?
I raised my hand, Matt, see? I just wanted to actually add a comment because I know that there had been some discussion last summer about, thinking creatively and using space at Rosemont and make a nightly or almost nightly now drive to the Berry Recreation Center and the other Rosemont gym there. And it's really great to have full-size gyms for return to basketball for teams instead of sharing four corners of a small gym. So kudos to you guys for making that happen and being really thoughtful about space, especially during COVID. I'm hoping it's a silver lining that we can continue that kind of partnership because it's really great.
Yes, we have talked about that with Rosemont, and it's been working out very well on our end too, not just for the participants. They've been very easy to work with and very accommodating. So it's been, I think, a win-win for everybody.
I think they weren't able to field teams without our people, so they were coming to our program. So it's excellent. All right, Commissioner Coyne.
I just have a quick question. That is it your sense that you said people really want to start coming back to these programs, and I think that's true. Like I said, a year ago, or maybe even a little less than a year, we were concerned that regardless of what was permitted and restricted, that people may not send their children to programming. Is your sense, based on the numbers that you're seeing, that that's not the case anymore, that people want to get back and get their kids back into these programs?
Well, it's definitely still a little bit of both. We're on the, we hear people who are interested, people who are still waiting a little bit longer. And then of course there's the school district, and what, you know, Beyond the Bell is definitely one of the areas that we're seeing limited participation. But, you know, people say we have our routines already and parents are staying home. And so that's, you know, where we're a little bit surprised that we haven't seen more participation, but we're definitely encouraged by what we're hearing, and the people who are in the programs now are very complimentary of, you know, the safety precautions in place and the communication. And, you know, there's hundreds of kids involved in the basketball program, so that is very encouraging. So, you know, we're trying to plan some more things outdoors. So for those people who are not comfortable in the spring, that we will at least have more options for outdoors.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner LeDuc?
I just wanted to comment from my own experience of what I've observed with my kids, and then what I've observed taking my dog to the dog obedience class. Is I've been very impressed with how the programs I've seen have been run, and how spacing is being maintained, mask rules are being followed, and that there's even been alternatives. There was one night my son couldn't go to his dance class, but they because he injured himself with reckless sledding, and he was able to do a Zoom access so he could still kind of simultaneously attend, and I could keep an eye on him in case he fell over. So I just really, I'd say kudos to you and your staff for how you've been running the in-person programs in ways that are both safe and still fun for the participants.
Thank you. I'll certainly pass all of these comments along. I appreciate that.
If I can add, I can't see anybody, I apologize, but this is Commissioner Tunnell. And I have the privilege of going to Rosemont on Sundays and Mondays to coach two teams. And I do want to thank the Park District staff that's willing to go there as well. And they're doing a great job keeping us, you know, safety, checking people in, and they're just doing a great job. So I just want to reiterate, it's been a good experience in basketball so far.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else?
I'll just add that I think reckless sledding is a redundant phrase.
It is if you're an almost 11-year-old boy, apparently.
Oh dear. I thought it was also interesting that that swim team came back again. Do you know, did they try something else out for a while, April, or?
I don't believe so, but we actually have Aquatics manager Ethan Williams on the call here too, if he wants to jump in case we have any questions on the next topic. But I'm just awaiting to return to our location.
Yeah, they were, from talking to the coach, they were doing virtual workouts, and she said it was real. I mean, it got real stale, right? You can only do so many virtual workouts for swimming, and then you got to get in the water. So, and we have been in contact once the restrictions and we started seeing the positivity rates starting to go down. So as soon as we got the go ahead, they were ready to come back and get in the water. So they're great to have, you know, super, which is even better. So I don't have to worry about staff staying any later. So, but they were ready to go as soon as the restrictions lifted.
That's awesome that that partnership worked out well too. That's great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ethan.
You're welcome.
All right, and now we have to move on to pools, right?
Yes. Jumping right into that. I know when we last talked about outdoor pools that we were going to come back to the board with some options, but as we worked through phase 4 of our budget estimates, as you can see with the memo, we were pleased to see that our budget estimates came pretty close to where we had originally presented, as if we were in phase 5 with no restrictions. So the budget estimates plan to operate all aquatic facilities under phase 4 guidelines with the reservation system as we did at Hinckley and Prospect last year. And we did some research and as to what worked well and what did not work well with other districts that actually opened, and feel the system that we had in place last summer ultimately is our best option and resulted in a successful operating season and also gave our residents first priority. Some of the only a few locations that Ethan spoke to offered passes, both pass and daily reservations, and had issues not only with having to restrict the amount of passes, upset pass holders not being able to get a reservation, and then also resulted in even more of a financial strain to the district. So again, this current plan assumes we'll still be in phase 4 guidelines. If that shifts, then you know, as we've been doing for almost a year now, we can again shift. The details of the daily schedules are still being worked out, but we anticipate it would be similar as in to past years pre-COVID, with open swim, rentals, lap swim, swim lessons, and swim still to be determined as to whether or not the conference will proceed this summer. But we're hoping, you know, if they do proceed, then we'll have a spot and hopefully have a team. The memo also lists the capacities we plan to start out with and can be adjusted if we feel it can be done safely. And the budget summary is shown as well on the second page after the memo. So Ethan and I are here to answer any questions that you may have for us. Or maybe no questions.
I did, but I'm gonna have to look down. So if anybody wants to talk, just start it.
Sure.
There was one thing that was counterintuitive. It was like the more people, the less money. Does that make sense?
People, the less money.
Oh gosh, I should have probably highlighted it. It was just a little thing. I would have to, yeah. I mean, I think it's very exciting that you can, that you're gonna open the Aquatic Center, and hopefully, I mean, what we're hoping, right, is that it'll be phase 5 rather than phase 3, right? That we will be moving forward to more openness. And then the numbers look very conservative on the amount of people. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because that might be a question the community has.
You mean as far as the proposed capacities?
Right.
Yeah, well, you know, after looking at the square footage, and Ethan jump in at any time, we used the same practice as we did at the other pools, looking at the square footage and kind of mapping out how much space we would have per person and per family, and then also taking into account the actual amount of square footage for the bodies of water. If you would anticipate that, you know, close to every single person would be in the water at once, then that's, you know, something that we definitely wanted to take into consideration. So that's where the 220 came from at the Aquatic Center. And talking to 2 other larger facilities, they kept, you know, with similar capacities, they kept it between 200 and 250 as well this past year when they opened. And South Park is obviously a pretty small space, so that would, you know, if we can open those 2 locations, definitely, if we see that it's working and that we can open up to more once we open safely and see how movement is through the facility, and if people are spending more time in one location than another to, you know, can make different considerations. For Hinckley Pool, Ethan was comfortable with increasing a little bit more because there was some open grass space, and just seeing how things worked at Hinckley this year, he was comfortable opening up for more patrons. And then with Prospect, it was, pretty crowded at times, and he proposed to keep that the same.
It's good that we lived through it once, right?
Mhm.
I found the number I had a question about. It was on the budget page. The expenses for salary and wages for the budget was $426,889. And then for phase 4, it was a higher number. So did we budget for phase 5 or for phase 4? I thought we budgeted for phase 5.
2021 was budgeted for phase 4, phase 5, but there's also some extra staffing needed for, cleaning and safety if we're going to open the water slide, and having extra staff across the board, especially at the Aquatic Center. Ethan, is there anything else that you would attribute that to?
No, I think that's pretty well.
Okay.
So less patrons, but more labor intensive on our side.
Yeah, and the hard part is like, with the pools, even if you have reduced amount of people coming in, you have a fixed amount of guards that you have to have on the pool, regardless of if it's 5 or 50. So I think that's where part of it lies, where it's hard to get a cost savings on lifeguards per se, because if we have the leisure pool open, we have X amount of lifeguards no matter what. So that's more of a fixed cost when it comes to staffing. Obviously we will, if we have days where we rain out or anything like that, we factored in with the 10% rain out of cutting staff and cutting costs that way. And even if, as the day goes on, if we have people not coming in or certain areas not being used, we can always reduce staff a little bit more. So the hard part is like, yes, it is more labor intensive, but we have, if we're open all the way, like it's 14 lifeguards no matter what. So that's just kind of the hard part of the staffing portion.
That makes sense. Other questions?
Well, this is obviously really exciting, and I think going to be really welcome news for the community, not only just in the Harrington House, but across Park Ridge. I appreciate how you guys have broken this down. I appreciate being able to see the numbers and kind of some thoughtfulness around staffing and what capacity is at. Last year, the reservation system going through RecTrack, it's not the easiest. It's a little cumbersome, not easy to cancel. I know that when we'd be at the pool at Hinckley, it'd be like half capacity of what it could fill, and people just weren't showing up. And so you just wonder, you may learn, or we may be able to see how we let walk-ins in if folks don't show up during their scheduled times. I know that I heard a lot of noise about that, just because there were so many limited spaces, and then the pool was half empty, but no one could could buy a spot. The other thing I just had a question about was concessions. Were you guys thinking of opening the concessions this year at Centennial?
Yes, Ethan's already been in contact with Declan, and it sounds like he's interested, so we'll keep our fingers crossed there.
Great.
And I think just to remind the board, as always, with every year, the pool operations, these numbers are dependent on weather, right? More than any other operations that we have. So, that won't change, that factor doesn't change, right, from year to year. So there's always that risk, but let's just hope for a really nice, warm summer.
Mm-hmm.
But as April noted in the beginning of the meeting, people are willing to do a lot more outside than they were before. So
yeah, even if the weather's not perfect, right?
We're getting hardier.
Yeah, very true.
And programming of swim lessons as well there. And so, hopefully we can drum up some revenue. I'm sure you've built that into the revenue numbers. But that'll be great too, to be able to just engage more, have more participation.
Yes, yes, the only thing that's not built into the budget is this swim team, the competitive swim team.
Great.
Yeah, this is excellent news. Just great news. Anybody else? Okay, we'll turn it over to Commissioner O'Donnell for the, I was reading this report, it was like Christmas for Terry. For the Christmas part of the meeting.
Well, we'll start off with Superintendent Wolf and his monthly report.
Thank you. My report is on page 97. I do just want to take a moment to congratulate both Phil Ballin, our mechanic, and Glenn Nance, our horticultural foreperson, on their awards. It's very exciting, particularly the Park Professional of the Year being such a high honor, and our staff getting it 2 years in a row is very unprecedented. So it's very exciting for us, and we're congratulations to them for sure.
And congratulations to Terry on his award, which he did not mention as well.
Thank you.
Our staff, well deserved.
Thank you. I do want to highlight and just briefly touch on the last bullet point I have, which is on Marvin Parkway. I did have a follow-up item from our last meeting, which related to the actual size of the park, and I did measure it. It's 0.6 acres. It's approximately 65 feet by 385. I wrote it on my whiteboard over there, so that's why I turned. That will be something that we are using and we're looking at. Manager Meunier has already been working on a couple of preliminary plans for what it might be, what it could look like. And in our discussions with the city, they're very adamant about just waiting for the right time, and which I completely understand. We don't want to jeopardize their grant or permitting process, anything like that. So we will have patience and work with them when the time is right. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions about that or anything in my report.
Commissioner Grau.
We don't have any cash or budget money set aside for Marvin Parkway, right? Yeah.
We do not.
No hurry.
Nope.
Okay, but it'll be interesting to see what can be done.
Yeah, and fortunately we have, Manager Meunier, who's got talents, and she's a registered landscape architect, to, come up with some preliminary designs on something like that for us in-house. So.
Anybody else? Okay, so I'll move on to what Commissioner Grau refers to as the Christmas tree here. I move to authorize the purchase and delivery of a Toro Grandmaster 9510 Ford WD 16-foot mower truck with full season cab in the total amount of $99,204.93 through a joint purchasing agreement with Sourcewell, and will be fulfilled by Reindeers in Mundelein, Illinois, under contract number 062117-TTC, and to authorize the executive director to execute and deliver such agreement. This action will be formally ratified at an actual board meeting with physical presence at a later date. May I have a second?
Second.
And any discussion?
I just want to know if it has saved the park district any money for me to have it at my house, at my garage and I would test it out periodically. It probably wouldn't save any money, I'm sure. So
You better watch it, because Terry doesn't have much room in his garage.
I don't think it would fit in your garage, but.
That's right. All right, that was my only comment.
Any other comments or questions on this one? Mary Ann, please call the roll.
Sure. Commissioner Leach, Commissioner O'Donnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle,
Yes.
Commissioner Grau,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrington,
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc,
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne.
Aye.
So moving on to the infamous outdoor classroom bid summary and approval. I move to approve D&J Landscaping Inc. as the lowest responsible bidder for Main Park outdoor classroom bid in the total amount of $60,045.78, which includes the base bid and alternatives 1 and 2, to authorize the executive director to execute and deliver such agreement. This action will be formally ratified at an actual board meeting with physical presence at a later date. May I have a second?
A second.
And any discussion on this one?
Jerry, you're not going to say anything?
I'm just going to say that this is a great example of bidding at the wrong time of the year and bidding at the right time of the year. This contractor was one of our bidders at the last bid opening that we did last fall.
Oh my God.
And so their bid at that time was well in excess of $120,000. So this just goes to show that sometimes, while we might be anxious to get a project done, there's some value in waiting for the right time and giving the staff the time to work through planning and stuff like that. So when we get to the end of the season, people are booked up, and I know contractors, friends of mine, and they throw a large number and they say, well, if they want to take it, I get a new boat this year. That's great. So, and they can do that because there's people that don't have the capacity. So it's just something to remember. And so there was a little bit of celebrating and dancing around the office over here when this number came in. So, but we're just happy it worked out the way we hoped it would.
And I would like to just publicly add a thank you to Margaret and to the foundation for their fundraising and for their patience. This project, which seems so small, but it's, you know, it's definitely an intricate project, and it's going to be such a great addition over, you know, at Main Park. So very, very, very excited. And I'll also be attending the annual meeting to thank them personally, the foundation. So, you know, they really did get behind this project. And, you know, again, thanks to Terry and Jennifer and the staff for rebidding and getting these prices. So exciting.
It's great to see some of those kids who donated, you know, their pennies and allowance money to the cause as well when it's finally built. I know that we touched upon this a little bit in my weekly review of expenditures, and Sandra gave me a little preview, but can you touch upon the Project 20-30 savings that you're using towards this project? Because I think that's important too.
Sure. Yeah, that's savings from the window coverings project that we had for Main Park. So we had budgeted for putting in the window covers and blinds, et cetera, and shades at Main Park and a lot of offices, as well as some of the programming rooms that didn't ever have them replaced after our renovation. And the numbers just came in really low. I was talking with Oscar, our buildings foreperson, and I'm just wondering if when we got the initial numbers a year or so ago, they got crossed, or we used one of the higher proposals we had in case this guy couldn't come through. But the savings was so significant, it was kind of shocking, but we were very happy that it worked out that way.
Commissioner Grau?
Yeah, I just wanted to say this was a real stretch for the foundation too. They have not done anything like this before. So it's just, it's really great news too. Great news for the foundation, and I'm glad that we didn't have to wait any longer, and it's going to be fully what was promised. So a lot of people are going to be happy. Thank you.
Anybody else? I would only ask, is there money in the budget to have a huge celebration for this? This is something that we have been grappling with for as long as I've been on the board, and it's probably older than that. So
We'll make sure to have a grand celebration creatively without spending a lot of money.
yeah, this is big. Thank you. Okay, anybody else on this before I move on?
I think we have to vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mary Ann, please, that's a good idea. Let's vote on this.
Sure. Commissioner O'Donnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Grau,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrington,
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc,
Yes.
Commissioner Leach, Commissioner Coyne.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, now I can move on. Okay, this one has to do with the Woodland Park site improvements bid summary and approval. I move to approve Team Ryle Inc. as the lowest responsible bidder for the Woodland Park site improvements bid in the amount of $1,022,273, which includes the base bid and alternates 1, 2, and 4, and to authorize the executive director to execute and deliver such agreement. This action will be formally ratified at an actual board meeting with physical presence at a later date. May I have a second?
Second.
Okay, and discussion. Do you want to say, yeah, Terry, I think you need to speak to this a little bit. This is a massive project, and I was really impressed with your layout of the site. This is very, very exciting.
I think it's now horseshoes, hand grenades, and capital projects, right? So we actually, the very week that we were closing or opening up this bid, we were really pushing hard to close the paperwork on the forever ongoing Hinckley Tennis Court and Parking Lot project, where the contractor was delaying completing their final paperwork for a final payment. Sandra DeAngelis was very anxious to get that booked into for the audit for this year, and so we were pushing hard to get that done. And as we were doing that, we realized some savings. I had just been talking through kind of 4 examples with Executive Director Mountcastle, and she quickly said, well, where does that $90,000 in savings go? And I said, well, I don't know, back to fund balance, I guess. And she says, well, I think that would be a great one to use to offset this project and make it work. So I really have to give Executive Director Mountcastle credit for this and helping guide us in using that money. So and that was the large $90,000. And then with the main park playground design, we had budgeted money to begin that design process this year. And we had already been in the process since we were working very diligently at our capital projects. We had solicited a couple of proposals from a few of our usual landscape architects that we work with. And so that we knew already that we had a good proposal from a firm that we'd be comfortable working with and that we've done work with, so that we could realize some savings in that project, and were able to identify that as well at this early stage. So it really, worked out well. Just their diligence in working through our capital projects and talking this through with the team and coming up with some collaborative ideas. So.
Any other questions or discussion?
In this cost, there's also, Terry, approximately, correct me if I'm wrong, but $50,000 of, what do you call it, of, what's like part of the allowance, sorry, my brain froze. Yes. So there's 50,000 of this dollar amount is an allowance. So you see, we got 90,000, doesn't always work that way, but we got 90,000 back from the Hinckley tennis courts. So this could come in, we could get some of that back, hopefully, right? If things go very well.
Correct. Yes, we do have allowances built into this project.
And we also took the, we're suggesting that parking lot, as you see, and we talked about that at the last meeting. We think that's a very important one to take, and the other ones are minor, more minor amounts for the electrical and the concrete. That just makes sense to do those right now versus going back later, as we've learned on some projects that have been done in the past and cut corners on those smaller things, but they do make a big difference.
This is going to be really monumental for this park. I mean, it's really going to bring it up to par with kind of our community standards and where we want it to be in terms of bathroom, picnic shelter, pickleball for a new amenity. So nice job, you guys. This is really exciting.
Yeah, and don't forget the rain garden.
and the rain garden. Now, if we could only do something about the sloshy soccer courts that I get to walk across. I'm only kidding.
You know, I should speak to the rain garden just briefly, as long as it's brought up. As you may have noticed, that was alternate number 3 was for maintenance of the landscape, which really was primarily the rain garden. In talking with the contractor, the number that they put out, the landscaper put out, was just obnoxiously high. And even the general contractor recognized that clearly his landscape contractor had no interest in coming back to do maintenance on that. So we do have a vendor that we use, a contractor that we use for native areas for landscape maintenance. And I'm quite confident that this is something that I can add to our regular list of parks that they maintain to help us keep a healthy, you know, rain garden, native plants, that we'll just do that. And it will be something under operating at a mere sliver of that $68,000. So, but that'll be something we won't have to worry about until 2022 anyway. So I just didn't want you to think we were going to neglect the area, was all.
Anybody else? Okay, Mary Ann, please call the roll.
Sure. Commissioner Tunnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Grau,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrington,
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc,
Yes.
Commissioner Leach, Commissioner O'Donnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne.
Aye.
Now we have the mowing services bid summary and approval. I move to approve Siebert Landscape as the lowest responsible bidder for the mowing services bid in the amount of $877 weekly, and to authorize the executive director to execute and deliver such agreement. This action will be formally ratified at an actual board meeting with physical presence at a later date. May I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, Mary Ann, please call the roll.
Sure. Commissioner Grau,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrington,
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc,
Yes.
Commissioner Leach, Commissioner O'Donnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne.
Aye.
Okay, last but not least, we have the approval of the also infamous J.C. Park Tennis and Basketball Courts Engineering Agreement. I move to approve the agreement with Smith Group in the amount of $34,250 plus reimbursable expenses not to exceed $750 for the design, engineering, permitting, bidding, and construction administration for the renovation of the J.C. Park Tennis and Basketball Courts, and to authorize the executive director to execute and deliver such agreement. This action will be formally ratified in an actual board meeting with physical presence at a later date. May I have a second?
Second.
Discussion and questions? Commissioner Grau.
I do have one, just, it's not exactly about this, but Bono Consulting donated professional services toward our classroom. Is that a company we can use for these kind of things?
We can for some of this stuff, and I do talk to Bernie Bono from Bono Consulting, and we do use him for quite a few other projects, and I reached out to him on some that he just wasn't interested in. We did not discuss this one in particular with him, but this project we felt comfortable moving forward with Smith Group because they did Hinkley Park. But yeah, we do.
When we met with him, he gave the impression otherwise. So that's why I just wanted to say, you know, they're out there and they've been good to us.
Yeah, I think, you know, we hadn't used him in a little while, but I think sometime over the last year, I was reminded of, you know, that he's in town and the services that he could offer. And so we have used him out at Northwest Park for the baseball field renovations, as well as some stuff over at South Park this last year.
Great. Oh, great. That's good to hear. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Hearing no further comments or questions, Mary Ann, please call the roll.
Commissioner Harrington,
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc,
Yes.
Commissioner Leach, Commissioner O'Donnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Grau,
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne.
Aye.
Thank you.
Oh, Commissioner Grau?
I have one other thing that popped in my head when I was reading this. Was this the park that we got something donated by the township, Norwich Township, when it was? Have we?
We had a drinking fountain donated, and it's over by the baseball field. That was quite a number of years ago. But I don't know, we did get something donated there. I guess I should have let you finish speaking what you were going to say.
Well, that's what I think Jim O'Brien said to reach out to them, and I don't know, it might be worth reaching out to them and saying we're doing this big upgrade. You got anything for us?
Yeah, no, it's a good idea.
That's fair, definitely. We'll make that connection. Thanks for the reminder.
Okay, so let's move on now for a discussion of upcoming bids and projects. So back to you, Superintendent Wolf.
Thank you. So on page 111 of the PDF, I have a memo on the switchgear replacement over at Main Park. This was something that we had actually had budgeted previously, and as we've continued to go in through the engineering, we identified that it was a little bit more expensive and costly than we initially anticipated. So going into the 2021 budget, we had requested a little more funding. And basically what we're doing is we're replacing the main switch panel in the building because it's many years old. It's over 40 years old. And that we found that connecting between that panel and a lot of the sub panels throughout the building, we still have old cloth covered wires, which are currently okay, but the problem becomes is that there could be a fire hazard. And once we start to touch those wires and move those wires, you really should remove them. It's a good practice. So we're going to go through and complete that work. So we did actually open up the bids earlier today, and while we still need to vet the low bids, they're looking like it should work out in our favor here and work within our budget. So that'll be something we'll bring forward at the next board meeting for approval.
Any other questions or further discussions on that item? Okay, moving on.
All right, so the next one is a pretty standard operational item for our waste and recycling services. This is one that we do similar to the mowing services, where we'll bid it every couple of years and could potentially extend the contract if they're willing to accept the same price for the subsequent years of the contract. And this was one that was just time to be rebid because we had extended it as many times as we could. So we went out to bid, and again, we actually opened this already. And so we'll just be vetting the bidders to see what our recommendation would be at the March 4th meeting for our services going forward.
Questions or discussion? Commissioner Leduc.
I had a question. I mean, beyond the obvious criteria like cost and frequency, are there any other criteria that you take into consideration? Like, for instance, what type of recyclables are taken by the service? I just want to know a little more.
Yeah, so we do specify that they need to take commingled recyclables, and we do include number 6 plastic on that. When they submit their bid, they're certifying by submitting that bid that they are accepting that recyclable. I know that over the last few years, we've heard a lot about where the actual recycling ends up or doesn't end up. And we have not taken the steps to chase that down. I'm not so sure that we are at the luxury of chasing that down at this point. We had 2 bidders, and I've got a hunch that one of them might not have done their work right. So we might be having 1 bidder when this is all said and done, which is kind of surprising to me, considering all the garbage and waste recycling companies there are in the Chicagoland area. But yes, we do specify that they need to accept all sorts of different recyclable materials, including number 6, plastic.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, let's move on to the next one.
So the next project is the Northwest Park netting and renovation project. This is one that's been kind of moving along slowly for a couple of years. Park Ridge Baseball had actually presented us with some 20-foot poles and netting for a backstop, and it suggested that they would like to replace the netting at Northwest Park 12B with this and redesign the backstop, which it is dated and in need of some fencing repairs. So we had some initial discussions as to whether or not this fencing and this netting style would work better along Hinckley, because at Hinckley Park, because we know, like field number 3, we have some issues with foul balls along Bussey Highway. But with further discussion with baseball, we realized that it really wasn't going to provide anything different, because the fencing out there is currently 20 foot high. So when we're looking at that project, we'll have to go in excess of what they had already purchased and provided to us. So, each year over the past couple of years, we've budgeted money in capital to do some either baseball field renovations or some baseball field fence renovations, because our inventory of fields and fencing are dated and old and in need of repairs and replacement. And so we've always worked, with Park Ridge Baseball to identify which fields those would be. And then at some point, depending on the level of renovations, we have a responsibility as a public body to bring those up to 88 code, which is a portion of the project that then the Park District would certainly cover. So this is really kind of a joint effort at Northwest 12B, whereas they provided the actual netting system, and then we're working within some of the money we've budgeted to replace the fencing and redesign this field really to a new backstop system that we think we would use going forward for all of the fields, so that we have a consistent look to our fields eventually. We have a safe backstop. We're going to have concrete pads underneath the benches so the kids aren't sitting with their feet in the water when it's a rainy day. And then we're going to have a concrete walkway coming off a D road out to this park or to this area as well. So we are, because of the location, it's right next to one of the largest, if not the largest, oak trees in Park Ridge Park District. And so we're taking the opportunity to actually shift the field over 10 feet in 2 different directions, so that we can further move the field away from that and allow for better play and not encumber the tree as much as it would be currently. So we think this is going to be a good project overall. We did have the bid openings, and we need to vet the bidder to see how the finances are going to come in. And I still need to go through and discuss that with Park Ridge Baseball to see if we have enough finances to move forward or not. But that's all part of the process, having just opened up this bid. So we'll be continuing to do that and make our recommendation at the next board meeting. But I'd be happy to answer any questions about this project.
Commissioner Grau.
The trees, thank you.
And I know they do.
I also really know that the walkway from D is going to be very meaningful for several families who have children involved in baseball and football. And over the years, it's been really difficult for them to kind of bring their other children who may be in a wheelchair to the game. So that park is just one of the least accessible that we have in terms of getting to fields and others. So that's fantastic news.
Yeah, it is. And I share that I actually received a call from someone a few years ago when we first started on this process of looking at that who was visiting from out of town, but she couldn't watch one of her children play because her other child was wheelchair bound and they couldn't access. So we immediately started looking at the planning and how we could rectify that problem at that point.
Others? With the addition of the concrete in the dugouts and in the sidewalk, what kinds of water reclamation issues do you have on this?
You know, it'll be minimal. I think we're going to be able to either detain on site with some minor swales or, you know, identify whether it just makes sense to do a stormwater fee in lieu of, because it would be you know, a percentage of the construction cost overall. And it just might not be as much as it's like for the value of what it would cost to create detention, it might be less costly to just pay the fee. So we'll have to figure that out as part of the overall project and recommendation.
Anybody else? Okay, Mary, next item. Not voting yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
This next project is the limestone portico entrance at Wohlers Hall. It's the one, you know, coming off of Prospect side of the building. As we talked about it when we had our capital project discussions, that this was an area that had begun deterioration as we started to look into this, and we were able to show how that deterioration is continuing on. And so this really needs to be repaired so that we keep it structurally sound and looking right. And so this was a project as well that was, the bid opening was today, and so we'll be going through and vetting the numbers and making a recommendation again at the next board meeting.
And Terry, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a requirement as part of the Prospect Park project to from a historic preservation perspective to maintain the portico?
It's actually not. I mean, we have, my understanding is that we have actually met our requirements with all of those things, but this is a part of this historic value of that building. And so just structurally and like for physical appearance, it needs to be done. And I think this is the right way to move forward with the replacement on that building. So I think a big change would really alter the look of that building.
You don't think there are any historic preservation grant dollars we could apply for to help? It's a big cost.
It is a big cost. I can check, you know, I can ask if Manager Meunier had any specific conversations with FGM Architects about this, but they're pretty well versed in this kind of work, and I would have expected them to highlight that for us, but I'll certainly follow up and see if I can come up with anything. That was not me.
Yeah, and Superintendent Wolf is correct. We've met all of our requirements in terms of, you know, the list of things that we had to do for the National Park Service and for the grant, because this was the outside of the building and it had already been compromised, I would say, by the last owner. So that's where, you know, but, you know, I would think it's very important to keep this, you know, integrity of, you know, the look, right? Which is a big focal point of this building. So we can check that out. FGM would know about those grants, but we'll certainly look into it. Good point.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Other comments?
Just maybe the Historical Society had enough money for a fire truck. Maybe they could figure out how to maybe make a donation over to the building next door. Just, sorry, I'm just happy they're paid their rent.
Anything else? Okay, let's move on to the Activity Center.
So the Activity Center fire alarm, as you may recall from our capital budget discussions, we are in need of, we have a part that went bad, and it's the battery charger for the backup battery on the fire alarm panel. So the actual battery charger portion of that panel went bad. We did determine that we could find a replacement part through Second Market, something that was harvested out of an old system somewhere, because they're no longer manufacturing parts for this particular fire alarm panel that we have. We got one, we had it installed, and found that that part was also defective. So then we had to find a second one. We got that one installed, so now we have that functional. But in the meantime, we really feel that it's important that we begin the process to plan and replace this entire system, since we can't continue on indefinitely with harvesting leftover parts for an obsolete fire panel or one that's not meeting current codes. So because this panel would be upgraded, it requires us to meet current codes, and it also has other technologies built in, such as enunciators and things like that, that require a lot of networking cables and different sort of alarms in every one of the rooms that helps the firefighters identify where the distress calls and smoke signals, et cetera, are coming from in the building, as opposed to just showing up blind at the building, knowing that there's something going on somewhere in the building. So this is similar to what we had to do at Main Park when we did the renovation process there. So this is just the planning portion of doing that. We're looking to work with FGM because we did successfully replace the fire alarm system with the work of FGM over at Main Park when we did that project. So we would then have this ready to inform us on budget dollars that we would need for 2022 capital for replacement, although we do have already a preliminary budget estimate and a placeholder in the budget for 2022 capital for this project already.
President Coyne.
Did I hear you say that the current fire alarm technically doesn't meet current code? I mean, it does its job, but
it does its job, and it's grandfathered in, and we're perfectly legal to have it operating in the way that it is, but it just doesn't meet with it doesn't meet the current codes if we were to put in a new one, which is what we need to do. So we have to upgrade it.
yes, you have to upgrade it because I don't want to be the president of the board of directors that said, let's get by with the cheap fire alarm, and then we have some sort of tragedy. And I really don't want to have that be my legacy here. So, yes, definitely looking forward to hearing voting on that soon.
Great. Well, and I appreciate your support, but I don't want you to lose any sleep at night because this is a fully functional fire alarm system.
Anybody else? Commissioner Leduc.
Yeah, I mean, I want to echo President Coyne's sentiments, but also say that, remembering that in the past few years, there have been a couple of fires, like the one in the ceiling light in the gym at Centennial. I think that it's very wise to move forward. And I also think it fulfills the part of our mission where it's not as fun to, do something like this as it is to add a new amenity, but it's very much like the upkeep and maintenance of our current structures is also an important part of our mission. So both with this and with the Main Park electrical system, I think those are very important, even if they're not as fun to announce. So good work on that, and I look forward to seeing the bids.
Anybody else? Moving along.
Okay, so the next one is the Hinckley Park Sport Light Design and Development Project. So as you recall, we started a master planning process last year, and we put the brakes on it because of COVID. We have since carved out pieces of that master planning project, such as the community gardens, as well as the Hinckley Park sports lights, which really are for the baseball and football fields. One of the reasons that we've done that is because of need. We have a high need. First of all, these are old metal halide lights, and they're not the newer LEDs, so they definitely consume more energy. But we also have, they're at their useful life. We've had a couple of issues with them, such as the electric for these when it was run. Back then, it was customary to just direct bury the wires in the ground and not run them through conduit. So we've had a couple of situations where, the insulation, the plastic or rubber wrapping around those wires has gotten a small crack, allowed some water, and so we've lost ground and didn't have the lights working. So we had to bring out companies to do directional boring and reestablish an electrical connection just so we could get the lights to function. And as you can imagine, that's not really something you just come out and do really quick before a baseball game. So, we've had a couple of issues over the past couple of years. This is something that's also reimbursable expense as part of the TIF that Sandra and I have talked about and identified that, you know, portions of this and how that works into our overall capital budget as far as reimbursement for these things. So we think it's appropriate to move forward with this project at this point. I do want to point out, though, that these replacements are a modest replacement, not a full-in, let's, you know, go grandiose and over the top. We are looking to reuse existing light poles where we can. We've had the light poles, since they're wood, tested for strength and integrity and identified a couple that should be replaced as part of this project. But then we will also be replacing all of the electric and placing it into conduit, so that should we have future issues or should we decide to upgrade to you know, metal poles at a later date, we've got the infrastructure to work with. But we do anticipate that this project would give us, you know, 25, 30 years of useful life out of you know, this project as well. So there are grants from ComEd, new ones that were just released. I just saw something about earlier today that we'll certainly be looking at using as ways to we can reduce this. So, so that's the project in a nutshell. In that, you know, we'll be looking for approval of an agreement to begin the design process with Upland Design, who we started the process with for the Hinkley Park Master Plan project. I will point out that Hinkley Park Master Plan project, while we do have an agreement for you know, $39,000 and change with them, we did pause that, and we still have about $23,000 of value in that still, which still remains there and available for us to use to continue the master planning process, which I believe we did also agree to continue on with this year as part of the capital project budget. But this is just the next part and piece of that, where we will be diving a little deeper, because that initial $165,000 was with the concept that we would be redesigning the entire park and getting all the different amenities and pieces of the park that we were planning on, all the way done through construction documents and through the construction phase, as far as contractual agreements with an architect, and as well as an OSLAD application. So that's why there's such a large dollar amount, and now we're starting to kind of pull pieces apart to do the various parts as we move forward.
Commissioner Grau.
Can you remind me when that TIF expires, that TIF money? Maybe you said it, but I missed it.
I did not say it, and I'm going to look at Sandra really quick and see. I think it's, I want to say 2024.
I was thinking 2023, so we'll look that up unless Sandra knows, but we're still within the, that's one, you know, that's one of the reasons we want to get these lights done, because that's I think that'll bring us to the,
yep.
We can bring that back to you next time, Cindy, or let you know that separately. And Sandra,
you're aware, and it's not soon.
yeah, we look.
Well, it's coming up. Yeah, my recollection was also 2023, but I would want to double check that.
Yeah.
And you think this will bring us over the top for that money?
I think my recollection is that it would, but.
Yeah, we have to look at that, but yeah, I think pretty close, if not at, or, you know, a little over.
Right.
And just to remind everybody, there's designated projects for those TIF dollars, and the lighting, sports lighting was one of them, and they're very specific on it. We had tried to renegotiate to, you know, put some different things in there, but they were standing on the projects as they were. So that's, you know, again, one of the reasons we want to make sure we get these lights completed before that ends.
So you can clarify the amounts and the time frames before you bring this, when you bring this for a vote.
Yes.
Yep.
You have something else, Commissioner Grau? Anybody else? Okay, last one.
All right, so the last one, the community gardens update. I wanted to bring the board an update and share with you kind of the work that the Community Gardens Planning Committee has been working on. And so in the board packet on the last two pages, page 117 and 118 of my of the PDF has a memo as well as a rendering of the garden plots that we're planning, or the community garden. And so we've got a great committee of a number of members from Go Green Park Ridge, just general members from the community that are interested, and also people representing the Garden Club affiliate, as well as staff members. And we're working through all the different phases and aspects of this, as far as the design, the layout, the size of the plots, where the water is going to be, in the rules. How are those going to be governed? Are we going to allow hoses, or are they going to have to carry it in containers? Will there be extra things available to them, such as tools and other things like that? So we're really coming along well, and we just thought it was important that the board see where we're going with this and how we're proceeding, and give you a chance to kind of weigh in on the design of the garden plot area, and see if you had any thoughts or comments or questions about it. As we're going forward, at some point in the near future, we're going to be identifying a fencing contractor, so that when the ground thaws and we get rid of all this snow, we can get a fence up. We're going to put in some under drainage. We need to get the irrigation so that we can have the water opportunities, as well as do some concrete work. We need to get all that happening, and we have less than 3 months at this point to do it. So this is an important time for you to share any comments you have, because outside of going to bid for any of these things, I'm not sure that I'd anticipate doing any more than updating in my regular board packets updates on where we're at with this project. So another one of the nice features that we did incorporate, or are talking about incorporating, is a pollinator garden along the one side that'll help attract useful pollinators. And at the recommendation of Executive Director Mountcastle, I will be providing a letter as well as a rendering to the neighbors right along Elm Street tomorrow. So I've drafted a letter with Manager Holler's assistance, and we'll be providing them with a rendering as well. I did have a meeting today with leadership of St. Andrew's Church, and so we're working through some agreements with parking, and that we'll be able to use their parking, so that we can communicate that with the garden community garden members, and hopefully have we're talking about maybe some sort of a placard that they would hang in their vehicle that also identifies the hours and times that they can use those parking lots, and designate them as someone that's appropriate to use it. So it's going to be a good collaborative effort with a lot of people, and we're excited to get it completed in the next couple of months here.
President Coyne.
So this project has been in the works in a planning stage and desired stage for way before I was on the board.
Yeah.
So the one thing I just have a question, and you started to address a little bit of it, is how does this work? I mean, how does a community garden work in general? I just want to have, I know that this may be not the right time, but I mean, did people buy a little plot or rent a plot for the season? Is that how it's by fee? So they would do that, and then we would make arrangements probably for people that maybe couldn't afford that fee to have some sort of, for lack of a better term, a scholarship to use it.
So, I mean, fortunately, I've got a couple of members of April's team working with me. I've got Jennifer Myers and Sarah Groper, both from the Senior Center, or the Activity Center, working with me on this, and they've got a lot of experience, and they're helping me out with that portion, and they're working with the separate committees on forming the final rules in management oversight portions of this. But in general, yeah, we'll have these areas that are going to be about 4 foot by 16 foot, and they'll be available for rental. They're talking about, numbers right now that'll be in the range of potentially $30 to $40, plus maybe a security deposit if they don't, maintain the space, so that we can clear it out so it doesn't become overgrown and weedy and stuff, and to kind of encourage people to keep up with it. So these spaces are certainly not anticipated to be cost prohibitive. The final details of how that's going to work out is still being vetted, but it'll be very similar to what's going on in other communities. And we're formed already another relationship with someone that is involved with the one over at Niles currently. And she's also a master gardener and an employee who's been helping us out with just a couple of kind of side anecdotal things about the concept of how we're going to operate this. So,
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Harrington?
You know, we have worked over the years with the neighbors on Elm, and so I'm hoping that, you know, quickly you can get their feedback, because I know that's really important in terms of some of the landscaping and the pollinator garden proposal. That'll be really key for them, and to get their comfort level and kind of walk them through what this looks like, since it is bordering their street. I know they'll have some input there. So thanks for getting that letter out tomorrow. The only other thing, I know we've talked about this project in many iterations over the years, but one thing that was really poignant to me was to have the ability to donate fresh fruits and vegetables. So for those that are working on some of the rules, I would love to see that included as a component of the community garden.
Sure. I will let them know. Absolutely.
Commissioner Grau?
I have 4 things, but I'll try and go really fast. I don't see a place for your compost. Is that still, still?
Yeah,
Right.
these I should have highlighted that. These are 85% complete drawings, so we know that we're going to have them. We just haven't identified the location. But
That's great. And I think the size is very generous. Do you think the group would consider cutting a couple of these in half to see if there's interest in that? Because I'm a pretty big gardener, and that's a lot. That's a big size.
yeah, I was actually surprised at the size too, and we've gone back and forth a few times, and they've identified this as a good size. But it's certainly a point that I will bring back to them. So
yeah, if you live alone and you just want a couple tomato bushes, you know, I think you should maybe try it. Have a couple of them half size and see if it's popular, if there's a way to divide it. And since there's so few, are we considering a lottery to get those, or you know, for people who can't maybe be there whenever the opening, you know, like the preschool used to be or whatever, line up? I just wonder if we consider a lottery to make it accessible to people who are working whenever the registration opens up.
yeah, there's been some debate about how that's going to be handled, especially the first year, and then a lot of the subsequent conversation has been about whether or not we're going to allow people to keep their spot. If they had it, then you get first dibs at it for next year. And one of the points that I know some people on the group are you know, expressing is that there's going to be a very limited number of plots available, and it would be a shame to be locked out of them for years and years to come because the first group got in there and that's it. So I think that was one that we really, you know, we're allowing them to work through these things, but at some point, if it just doesn't make sense from a good customer service business standpoint of the park district, certainly the staff's going to step in and interject on something that we, you know, maybe that's just not going to work. But yeah, it's still up for discussion.
That might be another reason to cut some of them in half to give more people the opportunity. So I think it's really exciting, and your timeline is just so aggressive. And I brought up to Margaret today that I think it would be fun to have like a naming contest to the community to give it a little name and, you know, make it kind of fun. But I don't know if April's people would have to work on that probably, or the committee would have to decide if they want to do that. And I don't like the name you proposed, Jerry. So that's all. I'm excited, really excited.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, then I yield the floor to Commissioner Tunnell.
Hi, this is Commissioner Tunnell. Hope everyone's doing well. I'm sorry I'm on the road tonight, so not with the video on, but just a quick update on the diversity task force. Yesterday, Executive Director Montcastle and Commissioner LeDuc and I had the opportunity to talk for about an hour, and Commissioner Leduc is going to update us on what we discussed. If I could yield the floor to Commissioner Leduc.
Yes, thank you. So some of the things we talked about are developments like, for instance, that Superintendent Armour had been looking at things like descriptions of programming and making programming more neutral in their descriptions and more accessible, but also looking at some additional programming, like, for instance, like Passport Around the World and like the program that they put out with the kind of like the take-home activities regarding different holidays around the world. And then Executive Director Mountcastle updated us on, like this conversation she'd had with Paderma and looking at, some diversity trainings that weren't just looking at things regarding like superiors and the people under them, but also looking at how people deal with the public and helping with recognizing unconscious biases. So I think it was a really fruitful discussion, and I think it's good to know that Executive Director Mountcastle is taking a look at, what's out there in other park districts, because we don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. And our approach is one of trying to make the park district feel more inclusive for everyone. And I guess that's my summary for now. Commissioner Tunnell or Executive Director Mountcastle, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I think you covered it really well. The one other thing that we talked about, and I just pointed out in our very large budget document, is our 2021 tactics. And those are, the raw data that roll up into the strategic plan strategies. And so we did add both of the agreed upon larger items, which is a training on diversity and unconscious bias, into that strategic plan document for this year. So we are, looking at all the different trainings and making sure we're getting the right one for our district, which, like we said, there's all different levels, right? So, and then there's dealing with the public. And then the other one was the programming and a consistent review of the program descriptions is in the strategic. Those are both in the strategic plan. So it was a great meeting. Thank you.
And that's
I'll just wrap. Yeah, I'll just wrap it up and say that we are planning to meet in the next few months as well, assuming that we're all still here together. If not, hopefully the journey will still continue with Jennifer and so forth. So I believe that's it, and I'll yield the floor once again to Commissioner Leduc for the intergovernmental liaison duty as well.
And right now there's not a lot going on. Superintendent Wolf already covered the Marvin. I keep wanting to call it Marvin Gardens, but the Marvin Parkway project, and I haven't heard any other updates in regards to how the park district may or may not be incorporated into the sustainability plan that was recently posed before the city council. But if I will kind of circle back to them and see if there's been any updates on that. And other than that, that's all I got there. Thank you. And so now, yeah, it's back to President Coyne.
Great, thank you. Do we have any communications and or correspondence?
I do have a hand raised in the public. Could I unmute her? It's Melissa Halting.
Yeah.
Okay. Melissa, I've unmuted you so you could talk.
Hi, I just wanted to speak to Jen. Jen, your comment about the sustainability plan. I think council is gonna vote at the February 22nd. Sorry, you can probably hear my kids in the background. The February 22nd procedures and regs meeting about whether to form a a permanent sustainability commission. So that's all the information I have on that.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Melissa. Okay, where was I? Any new business? I don't hear or see any hands raised, so I move to adjourn. Oh, we're not done yet. I move to adjourn to close meeting for the purpose of discussing collective negotiating matters 2C2. We will reconvene to open session to adjourn the regular board meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Leduc,
Yes.
Commissioner Leach, Commissioner O'Donnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnel,
Yes.
Commissioner Grau,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrington,
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne.
Aye.
So at
And
this time,
go ahead, Marion.
at this time, everybody can leave, all the commissioners can leave the meeting and go to the go-to meeting with Gail, okay? And
I
then
need to
once we're
let you
done-
in first, so just give me a minute.
We actually exit this meeting, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
And then you're gonna come back into it after we're completed with the closed meeting.
Got it.
Hmm.
And we're back.
Yay. Aren't you guys gonna miss this when we finally go back to?
There might be some things that we missed, but I don't think that particular thing is one of them.
I didn't see Sandra's cat this week.
Huh?
I didn't see Sandra's cat.
No, I didn't either.
Y'all missed, I'm sure y'all missed my hollering at my children and the found baseball bag where there was lots of tears and car keys and running around. And so, you know, I mean, those things I won't miss.
Yeah, exactly.
Before we adjourn the meeting, I'm going to go ahead and just do a roll call just to make sure, because not everybody is on the screen. Okay?
Yes.
Sorry about all this, but Commissioner Grau,
Here.
Commissioner Harrington,
Here.
Commissioner Leduc,
Here.
Commissioner Leach, Commissioner O'Donnell,
Here.
Commissioner Tunnel,
Here.
Commissioner Coyne.
Here.
All right, thank you.
So we're reconvened. And therefore I move to adjourn the meeting of the Board of Park Commissioners.
Second.
We'll call vote, please.
Commissioner Grau,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrington,
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc,
Yes.
Commissioner Leach, Commissioner O'Donnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnel,
Yay.
Commissioner Coyne.
Aye. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
We stand adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Have a good night.
Night.
Bye.